Have you been told you need to stop doing what you love, whether it's exercise, running, or a sport? Well, here at Dynamic, we don't like that answer. In this podcast, we'll talk to leaders in the health and wellness space from Southwest Florida to get the solutions you need to get you back to doing what you love. Welcome to the Dynamic Naples Podcast. What's going on? Dr. Chris here. Today I'm going to be talking about the nervous system as it pertains to pain. And is your pain really a central issue or a peripheral issue? What does that mean? So when I was in school, I went to school in 2010, the tissue is the issue paradigm was a thing, meaning you've got pain, find out which tissue is the cause, treat that tissue, and things get better. I mean, that's all well and good, and that is part of the scenario, but your nervous system is the whole feeling system. The nervous system really is us. What do I mean by that? All inputs and outputs come from the nervous system. All sensation, all motor contraction, that all happens from the nervous system. The nervous system is our operator. It's the control tower. It's what controls all the systems of the body. It's the one controlling hormones being released. It launches immune attacks. It basically, without the nervous system, there is no human. I mean, we can say that about any system. You can't really have one system missing, but the nervous system is probably the nucleus to the human body. The nervous system is divided in several ways. So one way to think of it is upper motor neuron versus lower motor neuron. So your brain and your spinal cord are considered upper motor neurons, and all the peripheral nerves are considered lower motor neurons. Or you could say the upper motor neurons are the central nervous system and the lower motor neurons are the peripheral nervous system. I also do want to point out that the gut is primarily nervous system tissue. Somewhere between 40 and 70% nervous system tissue, and many will refer to it as the second brain. It's also true that it is the interface between the gut microbiota, so the bacteria that lives inside of us. Well, technically, it's outside. The gastrointestinal system is technically outside the body because we basically have a hole from our mouth to anus, and that is the gastrointestinal system. And in fact, we have way more bacterial cells inside of us than we do human cells. So keep that in mind. This is a bit of a tangent, and I'll get more into this in a future podcast I'm going to do on autoimmunity. But the interaction between the gut microbiome, the food we feed it, and the nervous system is huge. And again, this is a bit of a tangent, but this does play into what I'm about to talk about today, because what you put into your body can affect the way you process pain. Anyway, why do we need to classify things as in peripheral and central? The peripheral system is a little more what interacts with our environment, our physical environment, and our central nervous system interprets that data. All right, so if you touch something hot, the endpoint, the chemoreceptors in the skin sense that sends a signal to the peripheral nervous system. That in turn sends that message to the central nervous system, and the central nervous system decides what to do with this. Is this a threat? What motor change do I need to make to protect the whole organism? When the central nervous system decides this is a threat, it commands the peripheral nervous system to make a change. So really, pain is really a request for change, and you can think of what your action is. It's a behavioral output in response to a toxic or noxious stimuli. So let's make an analogy because they can be fun. So let's just say your 13-year-old son decides he's hungry and wants to cook some bacon while I am out in the yard and not paying enough attention, which may or may not have happened. And he cooks that bacon, doesn't open the windows, and creates a whole lot of smoke. Then the fire alarm decides, okay, this is a potential danger to the house. I'm going to turn on the alarm, or sound the alarm. In this example, the kitchen or the stove and the action of creating basically a grease fire is the peripheral system, and then the smoke alarm is the central nervous system. So let's just say this has happened multiple times, and I had the ability to turn up the sensitivity dial because I want to stop a fire before it happens. So I could turn up the sensitivity dial and maybe even turn up the volume on the alarm so I could hear it while I'm out in the yard. That's what the central nervous system can do. So if you get repeated offenses to the peripheral system, the central system can become hypersensitive. And although that may be useful for your house not burning down, it also can become sort of erratic data or sort of false alarm. So now when I light a candle, the alarm is going off. So that, in a nutshell, is what can happen to the nervous system. And we see this all the time as therapists, where we have a patient just came in after a surgery, and now that area is hypersensitive, and something as simple as the sheets in your bed can be enough to set off a painful stimulus. So it's more complicated than that. There's other things that can create hypersensitivity, and this is where my analogy falls short. So what you do in your life can also create a hypersensitivity situation of your central nervous system. For example, a few nights of bad sleep can do it. If you're eating a food, because that is, again, tied to your gut, and that is your nervous system as well. If you're eating foods that your gut does not like, or it feeds the sort of bad bacteria in the gut and creates an imbalance in the gut biota, that can create a hypersensitivity situation. The nervous system can also map pain to certain movements. So if going up the stairs bothers your knee and you keep doing that over and over, and it perceives it as a threat to the area, it's going to make that movement pattern painful. Also, the way we think and perceive of this pain signal plays a huge part. I mean, the brain is part of the central nervous system. So if we ruminate or fascinate about these types of things, it can create a hypersensitivity issue. What is rumination and fascination? Well, that's our ability as humans to think about the past and sort of predict the future, which again is a survival instinct and it's a helpful thing. But in situations like this, it can become non-helpful. So that's like, okay, last time I went up the stairs, it bothered my knee, and I think it's going to bother me this time, and maybe pain going upstairs is sort of my new future. So what am I getting at? I mean, if you've tried rehab and things aren't going well, you're still having pain, perhaps the endpoint or the peripheral tissue and nervous system may not be the issue. You may be dealing with a hypersensitivity or centralized issue. So I'm currently reading this book, and it's called The Sensitive Nervous System by David Butler. And if you're a physical therapist listening to this, fantastic read. It kind of reads like a textbook, so the average person might not enjoy it, but if you like to nerd out on the nervous system like I do, it's a great book. Anyways, they talk about certain patterns that signal that maybe you're dealing with a central sensitivity issue. And I'm going to go through some of these bullet points here. So one thing is if symptoms are not within a neat anatomical structure. So, maybe one day it's your calf, the next day it's the quad. If it's kind of moving around, it could be a sign that's a central sensitivity issue. Or that the original pain has spread. So maybe it was a little focal point. In one spot you had the pain, and then over time it spread, so the nervous system is becoming hypersensitive to the entire area. Or if you have multiple areas of pain, and they tend to coincide with each other. So when the knee's bothering you, so is your back, and vice versa. There could be mirror pains, meaning maybe your right shoulder is bothering you, and then suddenly the other side is bothering you as well. Maybe not as bad, but you tend to get this sort of mirroring effect. That is a sign of central sensitization. Okay, here's another one. If you're a therapist, you probably know this one well. You feel like you're chasing the pain. Maybe it's in the glute initially, then you fix that, and then it goes up to the back, or then it goes down to the quad or something like that. But if you're chasing around pain, another clue that this is a central issue. Also, the description can change, right? The pain is called it has its own meaning, its own name, like, oh, my pain. When people start saying that is a clue that this is a central issue as well. Another one is the response to a treatment is unpredictable. What works one day wonderfully on that area turns out to evoke pain the next time. Or here's one I love. When someone says, it hurts when I think about it. I mean, it couldn't be any more clear than that one. When pain becomes cyclical, that's another sign. So perhaps it's more in the winter or more at significant times, like at an anniversary, which is maybe a reminder of a traumatic event in life. Or if there's, quote-unquote, a miracle cure, right? So maybe you've been working on it for a while, and then you do one treatment of something different, like maybe you get a single ultrasound treatment and suddenly the pain is gone. All that's great. That's a sign that it was a central issue. So as a therapist, it can be really challenging to deal with. I can only imagine how challenging it must be for the patient. So what do we do about this? The first thing I would say is identify any kind of triggers or things that may be irritating or creating hypersensitivity of the nervous system. Things like sleep. Sleep is probably the number one thing. Are you truly getting enough sleep, and is it deep enough sleep? Most people don't sleep deep enough, and a lot of that has to do with temperature. You got to sleep really cold, like 68 degrees, to get deep quality sleep. What are the stressors in your life? And I'm not talking about just psychological stressors. Stressors can be internal or external. So things like environmental exposures to mold, for example, or certain metals, or pathogens and parasites, or even blood sugar dysregulation is a form of stress, and that can create hypersensitivity. And as I touched on before, the foods you eat may be causing a hyper-irritability of your system. This is where getting a food sensitivity test or doing like an elimination diet may actually help. One thing I tell my patients is seek more parasympathetic behavior. So when you're in this sort of hyper-aware or vigilant state, that nervous system is in sympathetic mode. It's in fight or flight mode kind of chronically. So doing things to turn off that dial, turn off that switch to go into parasympathetic rest and digest mode can be hugely beneficial. Again, sleep is big there, but doing things like massage, going for a walk on the beach or nature, things like that trigger the parasympathetic nervous system can be largely beneficial. And then, as a therapist, I would say the biggest thing we can do in the clinic is introduce non-painful movement. Right, so one of my things I do with most of my back pain patients, if they're really sensitive, is I work on breathing. Right, breathing can be super powerful, and you can use it to go into a sympathetic mode or parasympathetic. So I'll do a parasympathetic style breathing, which looks like a 4-second inhale, 6-second exhale. That brings more oxygen to the tissues, and it does a number of other things. But what it also does is create gentle flexion and extension of the spine, and rarely does anybody have any pain breathing. So if you start introducing non-painful movement to something like the spine, it sort of rewires the brain and turns down the sensitivity dial. The big takeaway is you should recognize that your symptoms may not just be sort of the end point. I mean, sometimes it is. Sometimes you go golf 9 days straight and your elbow bothers you because you simply overloaded it. But when pain persists and things are not easily explained and no treatments seem to help, or some of those other points I touched on, it's important to recognize that there is something greater than that endpoint tissue. And recognizing that and dialing all the stressors of life can be critical for a true recovery. Why guess when you can test? Do you get hangry or crash after a carb-heavy meal? These could be indicators that there is a dysfunction in your blood glucose regulation. If left unchecked, it can lead to irreversible changes. If you catch it quick enough, you can make diet and lifestyle changes that will get your levels where they need to be. 88% of Americans are pre-diabetic and don't know it. Diabetes underpins many of the pathologies we deal with in this country, such as obesity, high blood pressure, heart disease, and stroke. For some reason, it is rarely screened with your physician, and if they do test for blood glucose, it's usually with an A1C or a fasting glucose, which can sometimes give you a false negative. NutriSense is a company that supplies continuous glucose monitors. We've paired with NutriSense to get you real-time data to see how your physiology responds to glucose. The NutriSense app lets you track your daily activity to see how food, sleep, exercise, and stress impact your glucose. You can log or import this data into the NutriSense app to see the effect on your blood glucose levels as soon as it happens. Use the code DrChris25 for $25 off your order today. Do you have unexplained pain, or do you wonder just how healthy you are? When was the last time you had your blood tested? Blood chemistry analysis is a great tool to stay ahead of any health conditions, and now you can have control of your health with Let's Get Checked. Let's Get Checked is an incredible company that sends blood tests to your home. You can choose from over 30 different tests, whether that's thyroid function, testosterone, micronutrient, cholesterol, or C-reactive protein, which is a marker for inflammation. It is sent to you with free shipping, and you get results in 2 to 5 days. No physician referral needed. Use the code DPT25 for 25% off. You can find links in the show notes. Did you know that you can get started with physical therapy without a physician's referral?
Physical therapists don't just solve pain, we get down to the root cause and keep it from coming back. We also discuss all things health, such as nutrition and lifestyle changes. If you feel that you could use some help, let's get on a free consult call. Go to www.dynamicnaples.com and sign up for a free call. Also, if you like this podcast, please give us a rating wherever you listen to podcasts. It helps us spread the message. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.